Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Superman Earth 1 Volume 2. Now, this is the second volume of a series of graphic novels written by J. Michael Straczynski. He has one of those last names where I can say it in my head, but every time I try to say it out loud, it always gets kind of messed up. But this is the Superman Earth 1 series, which is a series of graphic novels that essentially retell the origin of Superman, but they're set completely in their own continuity, and they're not connected to the mainstream DC continuity, and they're set in arguably a more realistic world. Like, obviously this is not a realistic story, but it's as reality-based as a story like Superman could possibly get. Like, it tries to focus on how people would actually react to a being like Superman revealing himself to the world. Now, this book picks up where Volume 1 of this series left off. Now, in Superman Earth 1 Volume 1, a race of alien beings that you find out in that book were actually enemies of the Kryptonians invade the Earth looking for the last Kryptonian. So, in order to save the world from these aliens, Clark Kent had to become Superman and fight these alien beings. So this book picks up right where Volume 1 left off, where the world is still in shock that they were almost destroyed by aliens, but they're also in shock that a being like Superman actually exists. So in this book, you really follow Clark Kent trying to figure out what he should be doing as Superman, but also trying to live his normal life as well. And in the book, you see Clark start to develop a friendship with this troubled young woman who lives in the same apartment building as him, and you can tell that she definitely has some feelings towards him, but he's very hesitant about actually going out with her because of who and what he is. The story also starts following this serial killer who breaks into Star Labs because an acquaintance of his who worked at Star Labs, who knew about what he was doing, had some dirt on him, and he's now trying to erase all this information about him. But what happens is he gets caught by security, and what happens is they end up chasing him into this room, and he accidentally gets locked in there, and he ends up getting exposed to these particles that essentially turn him into a monster that's able to drain the energy out of anybody he touches. And in the story, this monster, who ends up getting named the Parasite, attacks Metropolis, and now Superman has to stop him. Meanwhile, the military is not sure they can trust Superman, and they're developing ways to possibly stop Superman in case he ever tries to turn against us. And that's the basic plotline of Volume 2 of Superman Earth 1. Now, I enjoyed Volume 2 of this series, but I definitely think I liked Volume 1 better. Like, I felt like Volume 1 really felt a lot more self-contained. Like, there were little things in that book that were definitely setting up later sequels, but it still felt like a very self-contained story, where there's a lot of stuff in this book that is clearly setting up stuff for the third volume. Also, there are a lot of subplots in this book, which I don't personally mind, but I could see that being a problem for some people. Like, there's this whole subplot in the book about Superman helping the people of this small island nation that is devastated by a hurricane, and the government of this country is refusing to help its people, and you find out that this government is a corrupt dictatorship. And in the story, you eventually see Superman help the people of this nation rebel against this dictatorship, which leads to a lot of moral implications about whether or not Superman really has the right to do something like that. So I didn't mind that subplot in the book, because once again, it led to a lot of interesting moral questions about what Superman is doing. But I could see some people viewing that as being a distraction from the main plot. I also really liked the relationship between Clark Kent and his neighbor. I actually thought their friendship was really kind of sweet, and what he does for her later on in this story is really freaking awesome. But definitely my favorite parts of this book are the stuff involving the Parasite. Now, I know the Parasite is a villain from other Superman comics, but since this is set in its own continuity, I think they do play around with the Parasite's origins a little bit. Like, I don't believe the Parasite was ever depicted as a serial killer before. I could be wrong on that, but I think this might be the first time where the Parasite was really depicted as a serial killer. And the Parasite, or more so the man who becomes the Parasite in this story, is a really interesting character because he's a sociopath, but I really liked the relationship that this book explores between him and his sister. I thought that was really, in a way, kind of heartbreaking, especially something that happens towards the end of this story where he's a sociopath, but you could tell he genuinely loves his sister. So yeah, I recommend Superman Earth 1 Volume 2, but I recommend Volume 1 of this series a lot more, but obviously you have to read Volume 1 in order to read this one. There's also a little reference to Batman at the end of this story, and I'm assuming it's the Batman of the Batman Earth 1 graphic novels, which I'm assuming are in the same continuity as these graphic novels because they're both called Earth 1, so I'm assuming it's the same universe, but I could be wrong on that. So yeah, that was my review on Volume 2 of the Superman Earth 1 series, and bye.